Good morning, everyone in the room, and good morning or good afternoon, everyone on the screen. Very happy that I can join this amazing conference and the insights we got over the last 2 days or 2.5 days. And today I have the honor that I can speak on behalf of my colleagues in the APAC, in GFI APAC, on harnessing food security in the APAC. I will talk a bit more general in some parts of the presentation, but I will focus on Asia specifically. For those of you who haven't come across the Good Food Institute, let me shortly introduce who we are. The Good Food Institute, we are a network of non-profit think tanks. We're working all over the world. At the moment, we are around 200 people working in 7 affiliates all over the world. Just a couple of weeks ago, we added Japan to the map. In APAC, we are 16 people. Here in Europe, we are around 40 at the moment, and we are still growing because we have the honor that we can deal with this nascent topic of alternative proteins. So our mission is to advance alternative proteins because we want to foster a sustainable, secure, and just food system. That is our mission, and we're working in 3 core areas. The first one is science. So around 40% of the people working at the Good Food Institute actually hold a PhD degree or something comparable. And we focus there on open access research. The second one is working with companies of all sizes and make them aware of the opportunities in this space. And the third one is policy advocacy. That's what I'm doing. I'm with GFI Europe, and at GFI Europe, I'm leading our work here in Germany and in the DACH area. We are funded by philanthropy, which means that we are independent from company interests, etc. When talking about alternative proteins, we are always talking about the 3 platforms of plant-based, fermentation-made, and cultivated proteins. That's what we focus on, and we focus on alternative proteins in the food area. Today, I already said we want to focus on Asia here in this talk, and want to see the opportunities that arise especially when it comes to food security and economic factors like competitiveness, innovation, leadership, etc. Before I do this, I shortly want us to remind of the challenge. Of course, on the 3rd day of a conference, we talked a lot about the challenge, but I just, as a little reminder, and I want to start with where we are when we talk about Asia. So I already told you I'm here in Germany, living in Berlin, and every year we get the news that meat consumption declined a bit, 10%. It's from 60 to around 50 kilograms per capita. If we have a look at Asia, we see a completely different picture there. In Asia, you can see here from 1960 to the projection till 2050, how meat increase or protein, animal protein, the demand for animal protein is projected to grow. We're talking about 65% here from now to 2050, 65%. Let us think in for a bit in just 25 years. A completely different picture like we have here in Germany and in Europe. So let me remind us of the challenges. We heard this a couple of times. Today, Hannah told us, again, 20% of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide are attributable to animal farming. We have a huge problem with efficiency. So the current food system is no longer fit for purpose if we think about that we, instead of just eating plant-based food, we cycle this through animals, which results in an efficiency loss of 87% to 99%. So takes the most efficient animal you can think of, which is the chicken, and you need to feed it 13 calories to get 1 calorie out of it in the meat in the end. And if you think about cows, this is very much worse. So this is a form, in our perspective, of food waste. And a last consideration, I think we touched this in the conference a couple of times, is safety and security. 10 million people are projected to die from antimicrobial resistance-related diseases in a couple of years if we don't change anything. So and this becomes a major cause of death in the world. We used to speak about these things for a couple of times, also here in Europe, but worldwide. In Europe, we, as GFI, changed our narrative a bit over the last 2 years because we see how political majorities shift on the European level in countries, etc. And we emphasized much more on topics like food security, innovation leadership, competitiveness. If we have a look in other countries, which we want to do today with Asia, this has been the case for a longer time. So while sustainability, greenhouse gas emission mitigation was the main reason to advance the sector, in APAC we see a different picture. So we have a couple of unique challenges. Maybe they are not really only the APAC room, but we see this here especially compared to the US or Europe. So we have still rapid population growth. We have smallholder farming structures which still are dominant there. We don't have such industrialized agriculture like here in Europe. This means that between 50 and 65% more meat is demanded over the next decades. We have a double burden, 2 forms of nutritional deficiency. On the one hand, APAC struggles from malnutrition high rates. On the other hand, you find other regions in the APAC room which have the opposite, where we're talking not about undernourishment, but obesity. And also we have climate vulnerability. And here we are really talking more about the topic of climate adaptation and not climate greenhouse gas mitigation. We see that the question of where we see monsoons, there's a big dependency on this question when it comes to the outcome from agriculture. And also, we have a lot of just catastrophes that happen there from all the time, floods, droughts, typhoons, which bring a lot of food insecurity in the system. And if you have a look at APAC, you're really talking about a diversity of countries with a lot of different dietary habits, political system, etc. So very heterogenic challenges there. Given that, I want to talk about policy because for a moment, because people really see this in the governments. If you have a look at APAC room, governments in APAC have priorities, policy priorities. Of course, these differ from country to country. But I wouldn't say that things like we discuss here in Europe sometimes, sustainability, etc., is a prime priority when it comes to policy in the APAC room. We're really talking about boosting economic resilience, driving innovation and technology adoption, improving public health, we talked about this before, ensuring food security, and then, of course, also sustainability goals to comply to commitments countries made in the UN, etc. And we really see, I won't go through here in details, that for every of these key priorities, alternative proteins provide answers. Government sees this in the APAC room, and that's why we have been seeing a couple of initiatives now, before we saw engagement here in Europe and in the US. I have some examples for this. So in Singapore, you may know in Singapore, more than 90% of the food is being imported. So highly reliance on imports in Singapore. And they started very early to bring up this initiative 30 by 30. So the idea of really reducing this dependence on food that is being imported. We see that Singapore really sees itself as a driver for innovation. It's very open to food innovation like cultivated meat, precision fermentation, and tries to provide companies with a regulatory environment that is really innovation friendly. This led to Singapore being the first country that approved good meat a couple of years ago. This year we saw quail as the second product that is being approved in Singapore. By the way, in Hong Kong, a cultivated quail is allowed to sail for 2 weeks now as well. And also we see that Singapore provides companies with guidance, etc., has really a very progressive framework for regulation, and provides stakeholders with things like an annual forum where they can exchange experiences, etc. South Korea this year really started to step up efforts in the cultivated meat area. They are now open to receive applications for cultivated meat, and really with the idea that they want to be someone who paves the way for other countries as well in novel food regulation and the approval of cultivated meat. And they established this year a regulatory-free zone, like things that follow similar ideas like the regulatory sandbox in the UK, etc. And in China, it's always a bit more complicated when it comes to transparency, but what we know is that the Chinese government really incorporates alternative proteins, cultivated meat, in their 5 years long-term plans. On the one hand, in the agriculture plan, this was already in 2022, but also in the bioeconomy 5-year plan. So governments are interested. And of course, we as a nonprofit, others as well, are talking to governments and to convince them to invest in this area and to really pave the way, regulatory paths to the market. We sometimes have the difficulty that we don't really have data on the economic potential, and this is what I want to show you now. Don't expect that I can now present you an SLCA or something for alternative proteins in Asia, because no such thing exists at the moment. There are some hints. So first of all, before I dive into economic potential, so we have some challenges: food security, economic equality, workforce gaps, and of course, I already mentioned the price protein demand, and especially the demand for affordability, for affordable proteins. And we think that AP, alternative proteins, can provide solutions for this. We don't think that it is the one bulletproof solution. There is not one bulletproof solution, but we think that it is a large piece of the puzzle. As GFI, we don't make projections about how the market could develop, but we, of course, observe the market for projections. We see that BCG, 1.5 years ago, published something which is a bit more realistic than other projections before, and BCG said, this is global figures here, that the alternative proteins market could, by 2035, in a base scenario, make up 11% of the global protein market. If you provide a lot of support, policy support, etc., and if we see some technological improvements, then they can go to up to 22%. How could this translate into Asia? I have some indications here. You see here some data about APAC and the role that APAC plays in the whole system. If you look at the upper section, you see public funding, private funding. Of course, 2022 is a bit outdated. So I really want to ask you to focus on the right side, on the APAC share of global investments in the public field and in the private sector, and not on the absolute sums here or the growth. And the share is really getting bigger. So if you travel back 6 years or so in time, then almost everything happened in North America, United States, etc. And APAC constantly built this industry and now really have a big share. So we're talking about a lot of publications, sector-dedicated shared facilities, more than 20, more than 200 startups, and a lot of established players going into the plant-based market. So this covers China, Japan, Thailand, Singapore, even Australia. India is excluded here. So we see there is huge potential. What we don't have is one study that really says that's economic potential. We don't have this worldwide. So there are very, very few studies about the worldwide economic potential. GINA, 2 or 3 years ago, was such a study, but we don't have country breakdowns. There are some approaches to this, Israel, etc. And we also have 2 case studies here from Asia, which I want to present, but this can only be a start. So Australia here, this is a government agency, government scientific agency. They measured how could the economic potential be of food innovations, not only alternative proteins, but plant-based proteins are included here in precision fermentation as well. And they say in a conservative scenario, this could add 3 billion euros plant-based, because in Australia they really can build on a strong plant-based industry. And in precision fermentation, in the conservative scenario, it's 50 million. Just to give you one figure as a comparison, the plant-based market in Germany at the moment is 2.2 billion. So there is some potential here. Another one is Thailand. In Thailand, Madhu Brava is a non-profit working in Thailand, Germany, and a couple of other countries. They did a study focusing on plant-based proteins, and they said that if plant-based proteins would make up half of the protein intake in 2050, then there would be economic benefits, 38 billion in value that could be added to the economy in Thailand. And they also did some modeling on job creation. What you see here when you have a look at job creation is they say that net 1.15 million could be added. And you see that if you do those modelings, then you of course have to take into account and ask yourself the question, does this also mean that jobs are being lost in established industries, etc., which they try to model here. We as GFI are not wedded to any of these studies, so I just wanted to present you some figures that there are studies, and wanted to highlight that we need to do these studies. There are knowledge gaps in this field. And we want to contribute to closing those gaps as GFI. We did so here in Europe with a study. This is not Asia, this is Europe, specifically on cultivated meat this year, a couple of months ago, where we tried to model what could be the economic benefits of cultivated meat market offtake worldwide for Europe. What was interesting here is that this model came to that the study came to the result that 63% of the market for cultivated meat will be in APAC. And that the European economy, of course, will profit from end products being sold here in Europe, which is 6% of the market. But a lot of export opportunities for European companies are evolving as well because of Asia. This was only a very first study. What we do at the moment is we do a more comprehensive one for Germany for all 3 pillars. And what we want to do in the next year is specifically in the APAC room is really want to have country-specific reports for this, and are working on this. Because in the end, worldwide figures lead to nothing if you engage with policymakers. In the best case, you present them results from their own constituency, but you really need at least country breakdown figures. And we are working on this, and we would like governments also to work on this, because in the end, a government study is those one who have the biggest impact when it comes to creating a political will. I was now talking about the economic benefits, but we also want to talk about food security. I cannot do a deep dive here. I can only give some food for thought about when it comes to food security and the challenges. The challenges, I think, are pretty clear. I already talked about this double burden in this area. Affordability is a huge topic, and also labor and workforce displacement. Won't go into details here. What we see is a huge increase in number of global armed conflicts, but also natural disasters. And we see that food inflation really hits hard in APAC, in other countries as well, but also in APAC. Deloitte made a study, and they asked themselves what is the impact or what is the potential of alternative proteins in developed countries that are very dependent on imports. From 19 countries they start with, they picked here UAE, Israel, and Singapore, and measured the impact. And they measured the impact in 4 dimensions of food security, which is availability, affordability, quality, and safety, and also sustainability. And what they found out is that specifically in Israel and Singapore, they see a huge potential to mitigate challenges in the context of food security, especially when it comes to the availability, because alternative proteins are less dependent on specific agricultural agent. This is one aspect, but those developed countries that are very dependent on imports are, of course, only one category of countries. If you have a look worldwide, then we have other countries as well. And that's why I want to share one last thought with you. Of course, we cannot only deal with what's happening with Israel and Singapore, etc. A question that is really neglected in all our conversations about alternative proteins is the Global South. I was talking about the diversity in APAC, maybe also in Europe, but if you have a look at the Global South, this really multiplies. We have countries which have almost no per capita meat consumption in Africa, etc. Then you take Latin America, where you have the highest per capita meat consumption, and there is not one solution on Global South. We really need tailored approaches here, and I think for a very long time we're not talking about cultivated meat here or precision fermentation, but talking about plant-based, talking about crops, talking about growing crops that help us to tackle this topic of climate adaptation, etc. And in the long run, of course, things like cultivated meat will have a perspective in countries with a lot of energy, etc. But this debate only starts now. We as GFI, my colleagues in Brazil and in India, are working on a paper, and we hope that we can really dive deeper into this topic. I think I don't have time to read out here my conclusion. But I think the main takeaway is the debate about economic potential of alternative proteins and about food security challenges only begins. And like in the sustainability field, like in the nutrition field, we need a lot of research to be done in this field. Thank you very much.